We would like to import from abroad those practices and models that work best, tweak them for our local conditions, and then in turn repay the compliment by spreading the word. We will invite you, wherever you may be, to participate in everything we do on the task force. If we are not about transparency and accountability, we're about nothing at all. So everyone here has a value proposition, and I encourage each of you to take advantage of it. So thank you for participating tonight. Again, it's a full program, so I will move on quickly. And in so doing, I would like to introduce Dan Basil, who is to my left. Dan is the founder and president of Tutor Mentor Institute, LLC. What he has done for more than 30 years is connect people and ideas to help inner city kids, particularly in areas of education. His work has been exemplary. Today, he is here with a specific mission in mind, and that is to introduce us to the Social Capital Network, which is our collaborator on this event. So Dan, thanks for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Groupon, for having me here. I signed up like the rest of you just to attend the event, and Sherry saw my name and saw that I was part of this group on Facebook, and she said, Dan, why don't you come and do the introduction? And Mark looked at my bio and he said, what do you do? And I said, well, my elevator speech wasn't there. And kind of like the rest of you, I do something that maybe you don't understand. So what I've been doing for a long time is saying, look at my website. So I'm going to introduce you to the Social Capital World Forum by asking you to look at their website. And I've got some help here from an assistant. So if you went into Google and you searched for this SCWF12, the first link you'd find is the Social Capital World Forum. If you go into that, you'll find their blog, and on this blog, this event is being broadcast live. So even if you don't get all the details tonight, or if you're here virtually, you can come back tomorrow or another day, and you'll be able to watch what's happening here. If you click in up at the top where it says About SCWF, the Social Capital World Forum was launched in Scotland in 2009 by Colin Campbell of Scotland and Dr. Manfred Helgry from Austria. The intention of the forum was to bring together organizations from civil society, NGOs, social entrepreneurs working at a regional, national, and world level. It's built around the idea of social capital. We all have ideas to share, but how do we connect with each other in ways that we know what we're doing and we can find ways to work together? So if you go back up to the top, the Living Bridges part of this is an organization that's been trying to build these connections of people and organizations. And so if you scroll down this page, you can see a list of people. You'll see my name there. You'll see a bunch of other names. If you go down further, you'll see a picture and a bio and a website link of everyone there. Imagine if when we registered tonight, or tomorrow if you want to go onto the Living Bridges page, you could add yourself, your organization, and what you do, and we each would be helping each other draw attention to our ideas of what we do. If you go back up to the top here, go back up a little bit, you'll see on the right-hand side it says Living Bridges Navigator. And so the group on Facebook where we've been meeting, we've been sharing these ideas. How do we connect with each other? How do we show what we do? How do we create a library of who we are? And this is the iteration of that as it is right now. If you click into, so I showed you a list of people who are involved. If you click into this little green box here, you see a list of organizations. And if you go into the other links here, you'll find a YouTube channel and Facebook and all kinds of different ways where this organization has been collecting people from all over the world and building a library of our ideas and relationships that hopefully lead to many of us helping each other do what it is we're trying to do to make it a better world. So I hope that you'll spend time afterwards going through the site here. As Mark said, we're doing research to learn what other people do. If people like this are creating libraries showing what other people do, it certainly shortcuts the time it takes for everyone else to do their research. So I'm going to be out here on Twitter doing my hashtags the same as everyone else, and I really appreciate being here. Those of you who are working with kids in poverty and want to get connected, I hope you'll look at my website, because I'm looking for people to connect and help me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Are you going to stay there? Okay. Just hi. Nice to see you. Have a seat. Well, this is going to be a treat for me, and I know for you. We have before us two visionary leaders in the social impact area. And my job is to moderate, and I think if I do a good job, I won't do much of a job at all, but allow these two to converse. So I may have a very gentle catalytic function, but apart from that, I don't anticipate having much of a substantive contribution to the conversation. Let me tell you who we have in front of us, to the extent you may not know this. Deborah Schwartz runs the program-related investing area at the MacArthur Foundation, and she has been a leader in this area for, you're too young to be a leader in this area for hours.
That's a good job.
Yeah. And Patty Morrissey happens to be a Groupon person who runs their Grassroots initiative. Also an extraordinarily interesting and impactful social enterprise initiative of Groupon. Deborah is a member of the Illinois Task Force, and Patty has recently been nominated to join the task force. So she will, in short order, also be on the task force. I should mention we have one other, I believe only one other task force member in the House, and that's Eric Weinheimer. Eric, are you somewhere?
He's in the bubble chair.
He's over here, and Eric runs the CARA program, which is an iconic, he likes me to say this, an iconic social enterprise. So we're going to talk about the future of social enterprise, and again, I'm happy to pepper the conversation with any questions or comments that may come in by way of Twitter, either from this room or parts well beyond this room. But to get things kind of started, if we consider each of us to be an agent of change, the question arises, well, change from what? Where are we now? Where is the social community? Where is social enterprise? Where's the nonprofit community in its social enterprise activities? So with that in mind, I'd like to give each of our participants an opportunity to kind of explain who they are, what they do, and why they do it, and more specifically, what the mission of their respective organizations is. And that then becomes kind of the starting point, and maybe from there we'll talk a little bit more about the future. But in so doing, Deborah, if I might impose upon you, one, to start, and two, in your explanation, if you would be so kind as to define for everyone who doesn't know it, what is a program-related investment?
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and it's really nice to be at Groupon. That is a really scary thing over there, and I don't know what that is.
It's a flying saucer.
And so I hope as part of the discussion you're going to explain why that's here, but okay. Especially after a long day, you know, that's scary. Could I just have a show of hands? How many of you have actually ever heard the term program-related investment? What a fun group. This is crazy. Okay, and how many of you have never heard that set of words until Mark said it? And that's okay. Okay, good. How many of you heard the term impact investment? And how many of you would be willing to stand up in front of the camera and define impact investment? Jamie, awesome. Okay, so I'm here to tell you that a program-related investment is a flavor of impact investment. An impact investment is pretty much anything where you're not, and I will say, you're not just doing a grant, although there's even some people who would say grants are an impact investment. So it's all fuzzy and gray. But in general, an impact investment means you're making a loan, you're investing equity, you're maybe making a bank deposit, you're engaging in some kind of financial transaction where you think you're going to get your money back, and you have an intention not just to get your money back, but to have some kind of positive social change result. Now, there are lots of investments we can make, and in fact, one of the really tough things is every investment we make, if it creates a business like Groupon and they create jobs, it's pretty hard to say that's not a positive social change. And probably every investment we make has some things that are associated with it that we're not so wild about. In the most extreme case, you might try to avoid investing in something, let's say, like a company that manufactures weapons, because we think that's bad. But they do create jobs, and that's good. And so it's a big, fuzzy space. And impact investing is about not the things that you're filtering out that are just out there in the world and you're picking and choosing. It's about having an intention. I'm going to create jobs with this investment. I'm going to get my money back, but I'm going to accomplish a goal. Just as intentional as if I were to make a grant. As MacArthur Foundation, most of what we do is we make grants. But program-related investments are a special form of grant that we're allowed to make under the tax code as long as we can prove that the primary thing we're trying to do is make that charitable impact. We have to be what's called a mission-first impact investor. In fact, we have to prove that we're mission-first by not making enough money to be of interest to a normal investor. So that's a little strange. So it's kind of like the Alice in Wonderland of investment behavior, because normally when your risk goes up, your return goes up. Program-related investment is often the highest kind of risk that you can take as an investor. You're doing things that are unproven, things that are maybe not very economical, they're very small transactions, they're very customized, and you're doing them because you want to fill a gap. There's a charter school, and they can't get financing from a bank because they need 15-year loan to make it workable, and their charter's 5 years. And the bank says, I'm not comfortable with that. So a foundation might make a program-related investment, or a child care center that's serving poor kids. And most of the families are paying for it with vouchers that are coming from the state of Illinois. And the bank says, yeah, you know, state of Illinois, a little bit shaky, I don't think I want to make that loan. So the Illinois Facilities Fund, now known as IFF, might make that loan because they know something about state financing for child care. What I work on mostly, and have worked on mostly for the last 10 years, 12 years of the 18 that I've been at MacArthur. And yes, I started.
I didn't want to say that.
Yeah. I work on affordable housing, and specifically on affordable rental housing, and specifically on affordable rental housing that already exists and is at risk of being lost because it's either falling apart or its owners want to do something else. They want to cash out, turn it into condos or what have you. And so we've been really focused on helping bring financing to nonprofits that are trying to go out there, buy this housing. There are more than 1 million seniors that are very poor that live in this housing and depend on it, and we're trying to make sure there's enough capital out there to take care of those assets. We also invest in a lot of different kinds of community development, financial institutions. These are loan funds usually that are doing those loans that the banks don't want to do for the child care centers, charter schools, small businesses, green enterprises, social enterprises, and so forth. The only other thing I'll say, and I'm sorry, but he asked me to define PRI, and that as Jamie knows, that actually can take a really long time. Jamie teaches a class at Kellogg where we recently talked about this subject. Before I came to MacArthur, I worked at a child welfare agency that was founded in the era of settlement houses by some of Jane Addams' close associates. I was their financial director, and I got to learn a whole lot about how hard it is to run and grow a nonprofit without getting into financial trouble. And before that, I was an investment banker doing public finance bond issues for hospitals, for municipalities, and even for a brand new enterprise that we created in 1987 called the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County. And I would argue that was a social enterprise, but that term wasn't something that I knew about when I went to Kellogg and graduated in 1988. It was only much later that I realized that combining finance and social change is pretty much what we're talking about in the social enterprise space. Okay.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you. Patty?
So who I am, why I'm here,
What you do.
what I do. So I'm the new kid on the block, clearly, and it seems odd for me to be in this place, in this room full of leaders who've been doing this much longer than I have. So I see my role in this sphere as I have a privilege to be able to amplify the great work that other people are doing. So I just want to say that first. There are folks in this room that I can learn from, and I'm hoping to add Deborah to my personal board of directors. So the way I got involved at Groupon was because of the work that I was doing with a social enterprise that I had created as a result of being a student at Loyola, studying social work, and felt like my options were really limited to have an impact that I wanted. A lot of my fellow students were focused on clinical work, direct person-to-person impact, and I just felt like there's a greater difference to be had if we do it on a bigger scale, and there's no bigger scale than I feel like I could make than at Groupon, and that's why it was a good fit. It's also a good fit because of where we started from, and it takes people like Eric Lefkofsky and Brad Keywell to look into a founder like Andrew Mason and want to fund an idea that was a social enterprise to begin with. Groupon wouldn't be here if people weren't open to funding social ventures. So the point, if you don't already know, is a platform for collective action, and it was the where Groupon sprang from. So as a way to fund the operations of the Point, which at the time was a platform that was misguided in the fact that it was trying to be all things to all causes, all people, and it was one of the first platforms like the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos and those things that you see that are really part of mainstream culture now. So as a way to fund that, they noticed the behavior that was already happening on the site, which was group buying. They said, there's something here, let's focus on that, and that's where Groupon sprang from. So I joined the team after Groupon already began in May of 2010, and then developed the G-Team initiative, which we recently rebranded as Groupon Grassroots. So what we do through Groupon Grassroots is leverage the capabilities of the Groupon platform to help people, help organizations acquire new supporters in the same way that we use the platform to help new businesses acquire new customers. And so far, we've done really great. We've raised over $4.2 million and funded over 1,000 community projects, but it's really the ripple effect stories that happen from that we hear about of connections being made and awareness being raised for some of these great initiatives. The component of the way Groupon Grassroots is designed, which I think is a newer idea for corporate philanthropy programs, is that it is baked into the business model. We're really intentional about it not being a separate entity, a separate 501c3, and we're discovering some challenges along that fact too, because the world, the environment around this wasn't built for us, and that's why the work that you're doing is really great to sort of create the laws and the environment that can allow this kind of sustainable impact work. So we are really intentional about making sure that Groupon is getting just as much value from the charitable work that we're doing as the community is. And so because of that, we have a big team. I was able to grow my team from 1 to 7 people in a short amount of time because we keep delivering more and more value back to the business, and it's not at risk for being cut. And the same psychology and business principles go into place with the nonprofit work or the social enterprise work that's out there. So how I got here, I have no idea. I want to call, really, it's such an honor, but I had the privilege of meeting Jamie Jones. She's going to come up a lot in this conversation, and she was a woman on a mission to create Chicago into a hub for social innovation, and I opened up to her about some of the challenges that I had personally gone through when I was playing with this business idea that I was doing before I started work at Groupon about, there's these groups for entrepreneurs and there's groups for nonprofits, and none of them get this intersection of I want to do good and be profitably profitable and sustainable, and where is that group of people? And the answer was there really wasn't one. But we're all out there. Look at us. We just are coming together, and it's really exciting to be a participant on the task force, to be able to shed some light on what emerging entrepreneurs are dealing with.
Well, thank you, Patty. And I do have a follow-on question based on your answer, but before I do, I should also tip my hat to Jamie Jones, who's an extraordinary leader in this field, and we're all grateful to everything she does. As we see this notion of shared value and the idea of convergence of sectors and blurring of lines, Groupon Grassroots, I think, is a very good example of that. I'd like to ask both of you to kind of reflect on, as businesses become more socially responsible, as it's built into their DNA, as social enterprises take roots and gain traction, what kind of impact would you reasonably expect to result from that kind of momentum? What are we all here for? What's the end game?
I think it's what does it look like for your organization? And to be really honest, I think we have some more work to do to even realize our social purpose potential as a business. We're so focused on the business that sometimes I need to wake people up and say, hey, we're doing some really great work here just on the Groupon side. And that's really where I think our true impact lies. And you mentioned the jobs that we're creating, not just for the people who work here at Groupon, but for the jobs that we're creating when we're growing these businesses that we're featuring, right? Everyone here probably knows that when you spend $1 locally, it has a greater impact than if you were to spend it at a national chain. Well, most of the businesses that we feature are local small businesses, right? So let's measure that impact. But we need to sort of wake up to, we're doing this, and let's measure that and be more focused about it and drive the social purpose mission just as hard as we're driving the business mission, but really they're not separate. They're the same. And I think it's a good thing when they're so invisible that you don't even know you have a social purpose mission, but you want to know as a business that you have a positive footprint. And it doesn't mean a positive footprint on, we did this volunteer feel-good program and we, for 1 week of the year, donated 2% of our proceeds to some charity. But what we do every single day is driving impact and reminding yourself. We have posters around the office of the merchants that we feature, because they're our heroes. They're the heart and soul of our community, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of what we're doing here every day. It's exciting for employees. It's exciting for investors. It's exciting for the customers who do business with us. But I think we have more room to push this and really let our consumers know, guess what? When you buy a Groupon, you're supporting a local business, and that has a value to your community, and let's wake up to that and own that piece.
Let me cue off that. I have a question for you that follows on Patty's answer, if I may. You mentioned measurement, and I'm a great believer that social enterprises and nonprofits need to be very intentional about measuring not only their financial performance, but their social performance. And too many nonprofits and too many social enterprises either don't do that, or if they do it, they measure activities rather than outputs, which are reasonable proxies for social impacts. Now, I know, Deborah, you have your own take on social metrics. Maybe you could share your views, placing them in the context of moving the sector forward. How would you approach this in a more strategic way, given your philosophy about that issue?
Let me get to that in 1 second.
You want to answer that?
I
Good.
want to talk
Perfect.
to the question that you asked about sort of what's the implication of moving to more of a shared value point of view, which is a different framework. FSG is a firm that has written a lot about this topic. The Aspen Institute has a fellows program trying to cultivate and support young people who are in early stages of their careers in a whole range of companies pursuing shared value projects. And I do think it's a change from the sort of corporate social responsibility being a sort of appendage to the company. One of the things that I just want to flag that I see happening, and then I will promise to do metrics,
Thank you.
is that the attitudes and values and priorities of the next generation of talent is really changing. It is a hugely different world than when I went to Kellogg in 1986, and there were exactly 6 of us in the nonprofit management program, and it was really only one of 2 or 3 business schools in the country that even had something called a nonprofit management program. So Net Impact, how many of you are members of Net Impact? How many of you even have heard of Net Impact? So it's got 30,000 members and 300 chapters in the US and abroad. They've issued a report we help fund called What Workers Want. And one of the most striking things is workers are not just looking for a company that has a nice CSR policy, the volunteer, just what you said about, they're not just looking to have a nice volunteer day or know that they do recycling. That matters. But what really is motivating this next generation is the opportunity to do what Patty's talking about, which is to work your values so that the job you're doing, that you feel like that is part and parcel of what you're trying to accomplish and contribute to society. And I think that's a huge shift because companies are getting it and realizing that to get that talent, they got to show up at the Net Impact Conference, they got to really think hard. So I think this leads to metrics. The kind of sea change we're seeing is a cultural change, and I'm not sure it's going to be very easy, to measure what it means in terms of how does it affect local economies, how does it affect the green footprint of companies, how does it affect the giving behavior of companies. I think it's going to be very tough because this is a slow but really important systemic mind shift that is happening. In terms of metrics, it's a tough thing because on the one hand, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do, right? So you got to know something about what you're trying to accomplish. Whether you're a business, whether you're a nonprofit or philanthropy, you got to know. But if you get so wedded to the metrics, you fall into that trap of teaching to the test, of steering your program to deliver that metric. And so you better pick those metrics carefully because they are going to drive your strategy. They're going to be the incentives that people are worried about. And you have to be careful about the unintended consequences. And especially in the world of social change, which is as dynamic and complex as it comes, because you're not just a customer in a business. You've got all these different stakeholders. You have policy, markets, individuals, community. You have a lot of folks pushing and pulling. And so you've got to leave yourself the flexibility to adapt. So I am a believer that you have to have accountability, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish, but you have to also figure out how to be adaptive. And I think that's, an ongoing conversation and challenge. And it's also really expensive to collect good data.
Yes.
And so one of the challenges also we see is that foundations say they want all this great data, and everybody wants a little bit different data. And it drives the poor organization, nonprofit or for-profit, a little bit crazy. And you have to start to ask whether that's the best way to get to the goal.
Thank you.
So
Great
that's
answer.
the philosophy.
That's a great answer. Now, you're both talking about the next generation. You are the next generation. You are too, sweethearts. She's a little older than
My
you.
30th birthday is like in a week, so I'll be in that.
Let-
I'm being honest here.
Let's not even go there. So, as we talk about the next generation, which includes both of you and clearly not me, let's talk about leadership. And we've already kind of touched on lots of different ways of defining objectives for an organization, implementing strategy, and so on. What are the traits that you think are necessary in tomorrow's leaders to optimize the impact of the social enterprise? What kind of people should be running these railroads?
I think I can answer what I'm attracted to and what I think I've seen work so far. I think we need a blend of both. I don't think we have that key leader caricature yet. We have sort of the next generation, and that group parallels, I think, the most similarly to the startup community. That was the home away from the non-existing home that I was craving. The place where I found I got the most out of when I was starting a social venture on my own was this group called Jelly that met every Monday and every Wednesday at Noble Tree Coffee. It was run by the owner of Dojo, and it's just a bunch of guys, because it was mostly guys in zip-up hoodies, and you wouldn't think anything about them, but these are some super talented tech entrepreneurs. So it makes sense to me that Chuck Templeton would come in and be the managing director for the Impact Engine and be working at a space like 1871. There isn't really a separation between that type of innovation and that entrepreneurial leadership, that be willing to take risks, not willing to wait for someone to help you out, just start it yourself. All of that, I think, is what's happening and for the next generation. But we need sort of what's worked, right? What practices, what interventions in the community, those tried and true, studied for a long time. Let's not change some of that, but maybe apply new technology and a new thought process behind the willingness to take risks to achieve some of those things. So that's what I think.
So I think it's a critical question. We all talk a lot about the importance of financial sustainability, whether you're a nonprofit or social enterprise, and I would argue one of the things that's shifting is we're realizing that that's something of an artificial line. Nonprofit is a tax status, and it can make sense given a particular enterprise's objectives, if that's the right way to raise your capital, and there's an awful lot to recommend a tax status that allows you to get donations and avoid paying taxes. But for some folks, that's the right model. For some folks, it's for profit. I think the leadership question bridges those sectors, because in both cases, it's the leadership that is at the center of whether or not the organization manages to take a business concept, and again, I use that term to apply to both nonprofit and for-profit social enterprises, to take the business side of that, whatever it is, and to actually execute in a way that's going to be successful, that's going to be sustainable, if it's important to scale, that's going to be able to scale. So we see no one thing in underwriting an organization and evaluating whether we can invest our money, and we manage a $300 million pool of below market capital. There is nothing more important to us in weighing that decision than the leadership, and by leadership I mean both the people who are day to day in the CEO, president, senior management team, but also the board. I think one of the big areas that we need to continue to work on is not only having great talent at that entrepreneur CEO level, but helping people be effective and be interested and motivated and understand what it means to be on the board of a social enterprise. Because whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, if you're trying to be intentional about a sustainable financial model and a serious social impact, you are going to have challenges and trade-offs, and the mission and the money are going to be in tension by definition. They're always in tension. They're in tension for groups that live 100% on donations. They're in tension for a group that does everything through a market-based business model. There are trade-offs, and you need leadership that is conscious of those trade-offs and able to navigate that, and for the mission to be strong, but not to swamp out the smart business decisions that allow it to be successful financially, and you don't want the financial objectives to push the mission and crowd it out. So I think you need somebody who's really great at holding two competing things into a dynamic tension all the time, and to dealing with all the stakeholders that come with trying to be a leader in a social enterprise. I think it's fabulously interesting and challenging and really, really hard. There's lots of new opportunities. I would just say the other thing we worry about is, as this new wave of talent and interest is out there, will they only be interested in the startup? Will they only be interested in incubating the thing over at Impact Engine, which is great, but will they also see that there's an opportunity to exercise leadership by going and working with a well-established human services organization, a place that has been a social enterprise maybe for 100 years. It's still a social enterprise, again, even if it's nonprofit. So Jane Addams, who founded Hull House right here in Chicago and not very far from here, was an unbelievable social entrepreneur. She was running housing, she had a daycare center, she had a kitchen, she had a whole bunch of businesses that succeeded and some that failed. And we just wouldn't have the infrastructure in the social sector that we have today in this city or in the country if people only thought that what mattered was what they started new. So that, to me, is not a question of the talent. It's a question of how do we make sure the talent knows where the opportunity lies.
Okay, I think that's a terrific answer. And since it's such a good answer, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that I think is occurring to lots of people in this room and throughout the world who are listening to you.
And that whole feed thing is
Yes,
really
and
scary.
Jess is ready to give you questions whenever you're ready.
Okay.
I'll take some when you have them.
Keep looking over your shoulder.
But here is my question, and Deborah, you're going to want to put your thinking cap on here.
Okay.
Not because you don't immediately know the answer, but because you're going to have to be very political about how you answer it.
Oh, okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah.
So what can social enterprises do to become more attractive to impact investors?
Okay, so again, impact investors is this very broad tent. It includes investors who are mission first, those of us who use below market capital, like a program-related investment, where we have to be mission first, or we won't fit the definition that's in the tax code. We won't be allowed to make a program-related investment. Those who are money first, who want to look for things that are going to align with, let's say, their objectives around environmental sustainability, but they need, let's say they're a pension fund. They are required by law to show that they're not jeopardizing the assets that they're in charge of. They need to show that they're being good stewards and fiduciaries. So impact investing is all of those things, everything from market rate to below market and murky stuff in between. I think, and I work with lots of groups that are groups we've invested in, and we help them try to raise other capital. We also try to be helpful to groups that we might not be able to invest in because it's not part of our program focus. You know, we're focused on rental housing. We do try to help them think about how to reach those investors. The problem is it is a giant, fragmented, disorganized space by and large, and like anything in a business context, there's segmentation that goes on. And so I think you have to really look at and say, am I trying to raise capital from a market rate investor? You got to ask yourself, do I have a business model that can sustain that cost of capital? In other words, is there a reason to believe that my social mission can still be accomplished even if I'm paying 15, 20, 25% target return on equity? There's a whole lot of stuff in the social sector for which that just isn't workable because it's a structural intrinsic capital gap. I'm going to borrow from the former president who just said, it's arithmetic, right? We all heard that? If I'm housing people whose average income is $10,000 a year, and that is the average income of an elderly senior living in a building run by any one of the 25 nonprofits in my loan portfolio. That $10,000 income that that senior has, if they have to also buy food and medicine and transit and clothes and everything else that they need to live, they cannot pay enough to cover the costs of operating that building, let alone building that building and paying financing costs. That's a math problem. And all the proof of concept and demonstration in the world does not solve that math problem. That social enterprise, like National Church Residences, which houses 15,000 seniors in this situation who are living on disability or Social Security, they have to have capital that comes with a subsidy. And so that's a different pitch. And I think, you know, the answer to that question is, what is the subsidy environment? What is the policy and regulatory environment? How can I capture external subsidy, be it from Section 8, which is a program out of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, which is administered through the IRS and Treasury. They got to look and see where are the other sources to help fill the pool of capital that I need to do my business. So it really depends. Who are you serving as a social enterprise? What is your business model? And what's the math look like? And then that's going to tell you. And what I'm looking for is an organization that has thought that through. So they got to have a good leader, they got to have a good business plan, they got to be really realistic about what it's going to take to operate sustainably. So that's, you know, being hard-headed. You can have a soft heart, but you got to be hard-headed if you want to be attractive to an impact investor, because we all want to get paid back. So no fantasy financing. We actually do try to get our money back, otherwise the whole thing falls apart.
Thank you. So given those constraints and that reality and those imperatives, Patty, where do you see the market for social enterprises in, let's say, the Chicago area or Illinois? Where do you see the growth segments to be? Where are the business opportunities for mission-driven ventures in this city and this state? 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Are you saying in what sector?
Yeah. If somebody wanted to launch a social enterprise, where would there be the easiest value proposition to get something done?
I don't really know. I think we're trying to fund really good ideas.
Okay.
I don't feel like I can answer that question as
What
as
kinds
well
of
as-
ventures are you funding now? And can you extrapolate from that experience and see these are the areas that seem to have legs?
Oh, sure. I think workforce development is an immediate one. And that seems to be the trend in what we're seeing with the social enterprises that we funded in Chicago and elsewhere in supporting their work. Because it's, for our platform, what works is selling products that are created by these people who are participating in the workforce development program. I've been fantasizing, and I'm hoping someone here will do it, is start a social venture that disrupts the daycare industry, right? Let's do some workforce development and provide affordable daycare to families that are out there, because there are no good solutions. So any social venture needs to solve a true problem. It can't just be this nice thing that maybe I'll support because it's a good idea, but consider any business opportunity that any other entrepreneur would think about, like local commerce. That's what Groupon is doing on a global scale that no one else is. So solving those areas that really aren't even focused on social impact and figuring out how can you weave social impact into that, or the other way around. So I think it depends on where the entrepreneur is coming from. At least that's what I'm seeing.
I appreciate that. So what challenges, what problems do you think the social space is encountering and is likely to encounter? What problems, what frustrations does each of you have as the social enterprise community gains its traction and grows? Where do you think the friction points are?
I think right now it's just barriers to collaboration. We're starting from scratch, making sure that we keep investing in building the community around it. Events like this, resources like 1871 and Impact Engine that are more than an accelerator, but starting to build the community around it. I think we need more mentorship, right? So a partnership between an eager, new, excited social entrepreneur who wants to start their own idea because they don't know that anything else exists. It's not like these millennials out there are intentionally trying to, recreate the world around their idea. They just don't know. And I am constantly surprised. I'm every day my mind is blown by all of the cool things that I'm discovering and reports that are coming out. We're all content overwhelmed. So where is this place that we can go to and just go to one-stop shop? I've got this idea. Who else is doing it? What are the gaps? What skills do I have? Who do I need to connect to? What are my resources? Or should I do this at all? And who are the people who are going to have the rigor to really hold me accountable to making something happen beyond just good intentions and good ideas? Even if it's an innovative new idea, does it have legs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think there's this challenge, right, between trying to create a culture, like let's take Chicago, Illinois, you're trying to create a culture where people are feeling creative and generative and excited, and that tends toward the creating new things and tends to work against the idea of saying, how do we look at those things that we've had for a long time and get excited about those? And I think that's just going to be there, and that's a challenge. How do you keep people both feeling fresh, feeling motivated, feeling ambitious, but at the same time to not leave behind institutions, enterprises that are actually social enterprises, but in the mindset of investors in social enterprises, in the mindset of new leaders, they don't see that they're social enterprises. So we see this all the time in the housing space, the space that I've worked in the most over the last 10, 12 years. I am working with some of the most unbelievable, creative, talented, dedicated, fantastic people all over the country, and they cannot convince anybody that they're a social enterprise. But if you are delivering housing to a formerly homeless veteran who has serious drug addiction, and you are providing that person with a safe, stable place to live and helping turn the course of his life around, how are you, and you're doing it with the most efficient use of public subsidy that you can imagine, and most of what you're doing is to do it on a business-based, revenue, earning model, how are you not a social enterprise? So I see one of the big challenges is how to broaden what we think about when we talk about social enterprise, so we don't leave really important kinds of social sector activities, those that may in fact need to use the public sector. They may need to use public policy and subsidy. It's not a dirty word, to hit the mark. So having an entrepreneurial spirit, having a business mindset is necessary, but in a lot of areas, it's not going to be self-sufficient. It's not going to be enough. I wish I could tell you that I thought that every social problem we face as a society would be solved if businesses were just more committed to shared value, and people would just put their brains to it. There's a way to somehow get rich and solve all the problems in the world. I just don't think people have been at this for so long and failing to eradicate poverty because they're not that smart or they're not that hardworking. It's a really hard problem. And that's why we have a social sector, and that's why we need to always remember that it's not just the private sector, it's not just the nonprofits, it's not just philanthropy, and government is not the problem, it's stupid government that's a problem. We need smart use, smart partnership, smart collaboration, because there are an awful lot of problems here, and the scale of the problems is such, unless we're going to suddenly wake up one day and decide to redistribute income in a radical fashion, which I do not believe is in the cards, and I'm not sure, I'm a Kellogg trained, finance major, I'm not sure that's what I think is the right thing, and people can differ on that, but if you're living in the real world, that's not happening soon enough. So I think the challenge is for us to embrace the old, embrace the new, look for these partnerships, and as you're saying, not lose that energy, but at the same time, not kid ourselves about how big some of these problems are, and that we need all the weapons that we can bring to bear on the solutions. So,
speaking of weapons, what recommendations would each of you have for Social Enterprise Alliance Chicago and its members? How can that organization help grow and strengthen the social enterprise community? And I'm hoping you'll come up with some very specific, targeted, actionable recommendations.
Let's start with just what to call things, right? I mean, this Social Enterprise Alliance just put out this big, massive call to action. Let's stop Salesforce.com from co-opting social enterprise. Is that clearly then that word is important to us. What do we call this? Through some of the brainstorming exercises we were doing when we met with some fancy brand people, and they were helping us identify how are we going to talk about the work that we're doing on Impact Engine. And it's like, we can't use social anymore. Social is social media, and it's passé, and now it's impact entrepreneur. I think that's part of the problem, is that we just don't know what to call this. And if you don't have a name for it, it's hard to find the community around it. When everything's Google search termable, you need to know what to call things. So that's a first action.
that's very good.
Okay.
Not really knowing kind of the nature of what SEA is sort of doing, and I would say, first thing would be to actually know what you've actually done, what your focus is. But I think, Patty, you raised the idea of mentorship. I mean, I'm just really struck by the disconnect that exists. And here's a city like Chicago, where we have a really rich array of nonprofit and for-profit social enterprises, We have incredible array of students and young folks that are in classes where they are doing hands-on consulting projects. And so who is going to sit in the middle and make it easier for the professors like a Jamie Jones, like Linda Dara? I teach at the University of Chicago. There are undoubtedly classes on the social sector and the nonprofit world at almost all of the schools, Loyola and DePaul, all of them probably have net impact chapters. Who can make it a lot easier to bring relevant speakers to those campuses, create mentorship opportunities, create internships, put together consulting assignments that are actually going to expose those students at the moment that they are really being introduced to this world, expose them to the full range of career opportunities. Maybe you guys are that, I don't know who's that, but that seems to me to be another really big, I mean, I totally agree, the language thing is a huge problem, but it's also just, we have so many folks that just don't know where to go to get the pathway and to get connected. And, it can't be that the answer is that all of us just field those calls ad hoc. There needs to be some fabric that's connecting everybody.
Well, it is, I'm gratified to report that the Chicago chapter of Social Enterprise Alliance has very enthusiastically embraced those objectives, and we're working very diligently to meet everyone's expectations in that regard. So stay tuned, and thank you for that. I think we will have a Q&A session, but I believe to stay on our schedule, I should now introduce Jessica Malkin, if I can find her. Oh, hi, Jessica. Jessica is the executive director of Chicago Ideas Week, which is in its second year. It is truly a phenomenon, as is Jessica. And she's going to tell you about the plans for this year and how this initiative is driving innovation within the Chicago area, and something we all have supported, will support, and continue to be awfully excited about. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for being a collaborator on this event this evening, Jessica. We're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you, guys, and thanks, Patty and Mark, again, for extending the invitation. I recognize some faces through events that we've had in the past, but just want to give everybody kind of an overview of Chicago Ideas Week. We are in our second year. We are founded by one of the founders of Groupon, Brad Kewell. Shameless plug. So he felt like in the Midwest here, it's funny you guys talk about connections, and for Brad, that's been one of his sort of biggest vices about this city, is that in certain sectors like real estate and law, I think we find that this community is incredibly connected. And when we leave those two sectors, we find that there's an incredible disconnect. And you have incredible people who are working in the social enterprise space who are so scattered, and they don't realize the resources. So what we did was create a week-long Ideas Festival. It's intended to bring people from not only across the globe, but across the city together to enjoy programming that pretty much touches every discipline. But the broader goal of Chicago Ideas Week is to create a community and a platform so that people have an opportunity to connect, to create something, and to really put Chicago on the map for ideas in every sector. And so essentially, I'll give you kind of the high level. This year, we are 1 month out. We're taking place October 8th through the 14th. We have over 30,000 people that will likely attend. Tickets are already on sale. They're $15 a piece. We have the week kicking off with the social entrepreneurship session because this is near and dear to my heart, and I feel like this sector touches every single industry. We have speakers like Ed Norton, who ironically actually is huge in the real estate business, enterprise, and he's actually coming on board to talk just about the real estate issue and the fact that that is such a hugely important, critical social issue. We have Tom Brokaw and Colin Powell, who will be here at our military session, along with some other incredible leaders, do you know Taryn, American Widows Project? Is anybody aware of that? She's a social entrepreneur who lost her husband in Iraq to war. She was 21 years old when she was widowed, and she found that online in the social space there was absolutely no community for widows. And so she started a community online. It's now the largest online community for widows, period. She's now, all of 28 years old, I think. So she'll be speaking. But we have other sessions on design, art, the creative process. We have a meaning of life mega talk session on Thursday night of our week with Deepak Chopra and Mitch Albom and a series of other speakers. So the bottom line is that Brad's really broad vision for Chicago Ideas Week is that this becomes the Davos for the everyman. If you look at the kind of ideas conference space across the globe, what you find is that you can afford to go there if you can afford a $7,000 ticket to go to TED, an $8,000 ticket if you can afford to go to Aspen, and a $20,000 ticket if you can afford to go to Davos. So this is by far and away the most accessible platform right now being built, and there is no other American city right now that has this type of platform and this type of ideas festival. So I think it's so telling of this community and how hungry they are, how hungry we all are to have a platform where you can go exchange ideas and innovate and create something new. So with that, I guess I'll pass it back to you guys. But I just want to thank everybody. Check us out at chicagoideas.com. I know that these guys were kind enough to allow us to scatter materials throughout the room. But if you have any questions, have questions about tickets, my email address is jessica@chicagoideas.com. I probably shouldn't give that out, but you can email me. I will respond. But thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it and totally appreciate the community that you guys have. So thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, I think we have some time for questions, if anyone has any. And should we take someone from the Twitter sphere?
The first question is,
when is Groupon Grassroots
When is Groupon
going global?
You got it. So yeah, we have to repeat the question for the stream going on right now. Going global, it already has in some respect. We've created a international starter kit to make it easy for the other Groupon countries out there to get going. I think that was Jess was wondering when we were doing that, so she asked me on. Okay, soon, coming soon.
Any questions in the room? Yes.
Sure. So the basics of Groupon Grassroots, if you know what Groupon is, for the most part, we're a customer acquisition platform for small businesses. We're really the striving to be an ecosystem for small businesses with all the other tools that we're building. But the platform, as you probably experience it most, you go on, you have this incredible incentive to try a new restaurant, you buy it, and you go have this awesome experience, and now you've got this new local gem that you're going to go visit again and again. And so that problem that small businesses have of needing to acquire new customers outside of the people who are just happen to be strolling past their store every day, how do the grassroots small local organizations connect with new supporters when they've exhausted their personal supporter, their direct supporter base? And so what they can do is create an incentive, not a discount, but a guaranteed impact. Together, if we achieve X fundraising goal, if we raise $500, then we're going to buy the supplies to build the garden bed down the street. That's something that new people are excited about, that impact, and no one's called to action unless they hit that critical tipping point of the $500 needed to fund the project. Because when you're, getting hit up from the Greenpeace organizer down the street, do you have 5 minutes for this? Do you have, by the way, the trick is I'm already a supporter and give them a high five. Through Groupon Grassroots, I can claim that to be true for the most part. But anyway, we're bombarded with these charitable solicitations, Vote Now, Chase Giving, Pepsi Refresh, and there's this slacktivism, and then there's the feeling like my action, what I really have to give as a normal person of $10 or $20 here and there, is it really even going to matter? Why should I even bother? the collective action model that was invented on the Point, and which we've seen really take off in other arenas with arts and Kickstarter, social entrepreneurship and Start Some Good, all these different platforms, a little bit, when brought together with other people, goes a long way. So that's what Groupon Grassroots does on the Groupon platform. So this is a campaign we have up right now. This is with an organization that we've featured multiple times, DonorsChoose.org, and this campaign is to raise money to send kids to see the Bully Project. So if you haven't seen the film, it's one of those films that you're like, every kid should see this, and here you have an opportunity to actually make that happen, and let's get more kids who are experiencing bullying or are surrounded by it and don't know how they can raise their voices. Another thing that I should note about collective action is that Chapin Hall has reached out to us to figure out how they can use the collective action model and the Point platform to end bullying in middle schools. So they're exploring that right now. If enough students agree to step up in the face of bullying, will we reduce the incidence of it?
Thank you. Other questions? Yes. You.
This is for all of you, but especially for Deborah. You started to discuss the need for partnership, for collaboration, not only with young entrepreneurs, but collaboration with existing social purpose, mission-based organizations that could really use some of this talent, really use some of these amazing ideas, and really use some of the energy that they bring to these individual ventures. So I'd just like to emphasize that need for some folks to find a way to take some of the things that they've learned, take some of the best practices that have been utilized in developing countries and in other communities, and bring them home. Bring them home and apply them here.
So I think it's a comment more than a question, and a really great one, which is to really underscore the importance of partnership, but also kind of cross-sector, cross-country, cross-pollination and learning, so that if some really exciting venture has taken hold and had success overseas, how do we find ways to make sure that the learning from that, the models there can come and migrate into work maybe right here at home? How do we make sure that folks that are, on the path of bringing entrepreneurial energy and innovation to a new venture are also somehow connected to existing institutions that are always looking for new ideas and new ways to be effective? And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about the platform that you have, is you have that ability to create some of that cross-pollination and connectivity. But
Some synergy between those.
yeah, I mean, it's a challenge inside every organization. It's a challenge inside every field, and certainly in philanthropy, we work really hard to even just to figure out, all of us who are doing community development work, how do we know what each other is doing? And then how do we make sure that things that are really creative and exciting in the health sector might have some applicability in the job training sector, and in how do you get those kind of brainstorming? I think the idea of an ideas week and those kinds of forums where there can be that open sharing becomes really important, because much of this can happen online, but sometimes it is putting people into a room and trying to do that problem solving.
And what I heard from your comment as well was, how do we get the talent to support some of the initiatives that have been longer standing? And what I want to say from, what's exciting to be at Groupon is the culture that we've created that's really exciting. People are like, it must be so fun to work here. We work really hard, and you kind of don't see the cat after the first week of being here. But millennials, speaking for the generation in general, right? We want to wear jeans. We want to have our work measured by not how many hours our butt's in the chair, but the output that we're actually producing, so results oriented. We want to know that we're driving change with what we're doing every day, not showing up, here and there with a matching t-shirt for a volunteer program. We want to know that our ideas will be taken seriously and the day we start, not after we get enough authority. Everyone at this company is able to email anyone. There's no one who's off limits. We don't have walls up in our office space. It's all open. So creating an environment that is hospitable to allowing that younger pool of talent to thrive is really critical if you want people to stay. I have an open policy, coffee anytime with anyone. It's, same goes for everyone in this room. And so many of those folks are really disillusioned young people who are working for nonprofits, and they want to go for-profit because they feel like they'll have a greater impact on that side, or they want to go start something new. So we're alienating them, and that needs to be fixed if we want to see that collaboration actually occur.
I was going to say that, I will say, you would have saved us a grant for this research thing that we just funded on what millennials want out of their work, because you were like the executive summary here. And I think one of the things that was very startling, we just had a session with colleagues hearing from folks that were involved with the research project. One of the messages, one of the clear takeaways is that among millennials, nonprofits rank very low. For-profit first, government second, and nonprofits last. And that was a really startling fact. It has huge implications because we know we're coming into a period of time where a lot of the leaders of the longtime nonprofit institutions are going to be eventually aging out, leaving. And we had a big wave of folks who created a whole lot of enterprises back in the 60s and the 70s, and those are the folks that are going to be retiring. And it really amps up the need to bring fresh talent in, but how are you going to do that if the overall feeling is that that's not a good place to work? So I think it's a really interesting signal, maybe for SEA, maybe for independent sector, but clearly for folks that are concerned about the nonprofit sector, they've got to pay attention to what Patty is saying. And maybe Groupon needs to mentor some nonprofits and how to make themselves more, but I'm still going to tell you that's scary.
Questions? David.
What are some of the things you think that could change structurally to help social enterprise along? For example, you mentioned new legal forms that that let the leaders pursue social mission, new investment mechanisms. Right. If we had something like a single payer system some countries have that took the burden and the cost away from the enterprise and maybe made it easier for the future leaders then to commit to nonprofits and social enterprises. Along those lines, what do you think what's desirable and what's maybe feasible as a structural change to help draw money and
you want me to really answer?
People?
Okay, so I'm hoping Mark is going to let me actually say what I want to say, which is
I agree with you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I do believe that there are ways to continue to adapt corporate forms to make it easier. But frankly, the LLC, corporate form that exists, is an enormously flexible entity. And we have done lots of really creative new financing vehicles through the LLC structure, literally dozens. We're about to launch something we've been working on for 2 years. It will take the form of an LLC. I can't really talk about it right now, but I promise you we'll find a way to publicize it when it's out there through SEA and other vehicles. We have done lots and lots of really successful hybrid types of new joint ventures. The National Community Stabilization Trust is one that we helped incubate and create and invest in the wake of the foreclosure crisis. It's basically a clearinghouse and a matchmaker between the banks that have all the foreclosed properties and local communities all over the country trying to figure out if those are properties that they can get hold of and try to turn around. So we created a joint venture with 6 nonprofits, created a company that is a for-profit company in its essence, but then they were able to apply for and get charitability status. There are all kinds of creative things that already exist. I think it's important not to emphasize the form. The real issue is, do you have a business model? Do you have a revenue model that's going to work? And then you adjust the corporate form to fit that. The challenge with L3Cs, which is a form that Mark knows very well, is that it really is just an LLC with some language in it.
That's right.
And the language might be helpful, might not, but it actually doesn't address some of the challenges that we do have working with for-profits. And at the same time, I think a lot of people have overstated the difficulties of foundations working with for-profits. There is a different level of difficulty, but it's not impossible, and we have networks like the Mission Investors Exchange, which are helping bring folks like ourselves, where we've done lots of that, with folks that want to do for-profit investing and helping them bridge those gaps. So I actually don't know that it's a lack of structures as much as it is this community and platform, and we're just beginning to build those out. Mission Investors Exchange now has several hundred foundations in it. I think we're going to become more effective if we can continue to learn from what we've already done. So I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think the B Corp is an interesting structure, the for-benefit corporation. I think we have to be careful not to look for silver bullets. The form in itself does not make something successful. It doesn't make it sustainable. It doesn't make it investable. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
What I meant by structural, it was beyond the form. Are there other maybe systematic legislative regulatory changes, like different funding mechanisms, like something like a mentorship, or having SEA as the nervous system of the sector?
I think there's an ecosystem question for sure. I don't think that comes from legislation, regulation. I think that's collective action. I do think a clear problem that I see right now, and I think is likely to get worse, is that because we are so fiscally stressed at every level of government, we know about the federal fiscal crisis, but the state and local fiscal crisis, bankrupt cities, we haven't even begun to see what that's going to do to the social sector and the challenges that's going to create. And what we see is when we put together a financing vehicle that allows private investors to invest in, let's say, affordable housing, but that senior housing relies on a long-term contract for subsidy for a portion of the costs, and Congress, as they did 4 years ago, doesn't fully fund what it's contractually obligated to do, investors understandably get nervous, and that's when we see capital pull back. So the most important thing is, if you're going to use subsidy as part of the equation, the regulatory piece isn't so much the answer as much as it is a commitment for government to be a reliable partner. And I'm looking at Jim Lewis, whose work, in the human services is hugely affected by the state of Illinois, being a very hard partner for folks to work with. And that's really destabilizing whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit. If you're going to have a partner, you got to be able to count on them. So that's a giant, huge problem, and that isn't about legislation, it's about money.
Well, I think lots of food for thought. I would like to thank our panelists. You see why they're on the task force, don't you? Deborah and Patty and Eric over here. I also should acknowledge Dr. Jim Galloway, who is, I spotted over here, who is an advisor to the task force. Jim is the Assistant U.S. Surgeon General and Regional Administrator of Health and Human Services. And what else are you? An admiral, a professor of medicine at Feinberg, and a very good, all-around good guy. And we appreciate his contributions to the task force, and we will just exploit the heck out of them. So I do want to kind of reiterate two messages here. I think this has been an extraordinary evening, and I am very appreciative for your active participation, not only here, but in everything you do. But the two messages I would like to reiterate are: one, if you're not a member of Social Enterprise Alliance, I do encourage you to join. The materials are here, board members are here, eager to answer any questions you may have, and those who are participating virtually, again, se-alliance.org. Events like this are every month. Our next event will be on October 11th at the ING Direct Cafe at 21 East Chestnut Street. It will be part of Chicago Ideas Week, and it will be a conversation with another good friend, Chuck Templeton, who is the founder of Open Table and the managing director of Impact Engine, who's been mentioned a time or two, and that's Jamie Jones's baby, along with Linda Dara. So that's 6:30 to 7:30. If you join SEA, you will be exposed to those kinds of educational and networking opportunities. And the other ask on my part is, please step up, whether you're in this room or around the globe, and contribute as you will, your time, your talent, your expertise, your knowledge, to the Governor's Task Force on Social Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Enterprise. And again, the best way to do that as we build out our social media channels is to reach out directly to me, and that's mlane, M-L-A-N-E, at markjlane, marcjlane.com, and I will welcome you enthusiastically. So, I think I have done everything I'm supposed to do as the moderator. There is now an opportunity to get acquainted with each other, renew friendships, make new ones. There is food at the back of the room, again, provided graciously by Inspiration Corporation, itself an extraordinary social enterprise. And our gratitude to the panel, our gratitude to Groupon, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much.
I'm Brendan with Causu.
Oh, Mitch.
I took Mitch's spot today.
Oh, you're not Mitch?
No. I'm his number 2 man.
He told me you would be here,
Yeah.
because he and I have been trying to get together. I think we finally did make a
Yeah,
date.
you guys hammered down a time.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, he just today and
And
he told me.
In fact, I get
that partnership was important.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
So I wanted to just take